Good morning, evening, or afternoon, depending upon where and when you're watching this. I want to thank everybody for joining us today for our MISAC MuniTech Community Academy's talk on IT staffing and career. So we have a lot of different topics under that section, so I want to go ahead and kind of just jump in and get started. I'm Don Hester. I'm the IT auditor and cybersecurity consultant, so many of you may know me. You can see my Twitter there. If you have any questions during the session, you can tweet me and I can answer them, or you can use the Ask a Question feature here in Bright Talk to follow us. It's a good idea if you want to see any future presentations to sign up for the Bright Talk channel, and then you'll get automatically notified of anything new that we do. Also, you can find all my presentations also end up on YouTube as well if you're interested in any of those. I'm joined today by a very special guest. His name is Robert DeRook, and he is an instructor at Indiana University. Rob, you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you're from. My name is Robert DeRook. I'm the Principal IT Training Specialist at CERT. That's my official title at the Indiana University. I spearhead and do all of the technical training for our 1,800 plus IT staff distributed across those 7 campuses. So again, if you have any questions, feel free, post them in the chat window there, and I will kind of forward them and answer them as best I can. If need be, I'll jump in and let Don know that there's a particular question and we can get it covered. Alrighty?
Awesome.
Back to you, Don.
Hey, thank you. Hey, Steve from Mountain View. Nice to, you sent me a message and say, hey, send me an email because I think I lost your contact information. Anyways, let's go on to the next one. Please ask questions during the live event. If you have questions after the live event, please feel free to reach out and contact me, and we will try and answer them. You can reach out. You saw on the slide previous. You can tweet me. You can send me an email. Whatever. You can go to learnsecurity.org, and you can send a message to me and Rob. That's our security blog that we have. And please, at the end of this, rate this session. Now, during this session, it will keep track of how much time you spend in the session. And so it'll be like a CPE. If you need continuing education credits, it will track that for you. I'll show you how to do that. And there's a bunch of attachments for you, and we'll talk about them as we go. If you take them, and you can download the slides. So if you're in the live event, you can ask a question or see the attachments, and you should see these boxes available to you. And if you're watching the recorded, you'll notice that the ask questions not available, but in the attachments, you can still get all the attachments that we have, which include the slides and other items. As we go through the presentation, you will see up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a viewing certificate, and that is the certificate you get for viewing. And basically, it will count how many hours you're in here and then give you a certificate that says that. So if you have any requirements for CPE, that's how it kind of gets tracked. Mostly it's for self-reporting, and it doesn't necessarily follow any of the standards that some CPE requires. But for self-reporting, it works. Okay, on our agenda today, we're going to talk about cybersecurity and IT, and we'll talk about some of the issues between the two. Again, this presentation was kind of, when we envisioned it, talking with MISAC staff, was trying to talk to the idea of, like, if you wanted to have a career in cybersecurity, what should you do? But then we started talking about, well, what are some of the other career type things or staffing kind of concerns that we have? And what are some of the things that we see as auditors, or what are the things that some of the members struggle with? And so we kind of put together a bunch of different things. One of them was organizational structure. We also talked about retention and productivity, like how do you motivate your staff, how do you keep them engaged. And since COVID came out, because we discussed this all before COVID, so what are some of the challenges of remote teamwork, and how do we keep people engaged during this period of time when they're remote? What extra stuff do we need to do, or can we do to help them remain productive? And there's a lot of other issues with that. So we'll spend some time on that because that's important topic. We'll also talk about education and certification. So if you're going to get into cybersecurity, or if you want your staff to be into cybersecurity, what kind of education or certificates should they be looking for? And then we also have the last topic of effective knowledge transfer. With so many people being baby boomers and getting ready to retire, there's going to be a knowledge deficit, and what are we going to do about that? And how do we plan today to prepare for that tomorrow? So again, any of your other questions that you have that we can speak to, go ahead and put them into the chat window, or the question window, sorry. So here's just a couple of different statistics or things challenges that we currently have, or what the current situation is. And one of the ones that we find that is very difficult is that, according to GFOA, only 2% of IT budgets for local governments is spent on cybersecurity. And the accounting folks that are at GFOA looked at that and they said that is way underspending for what you need for mitigating risk. And that was the point of their talk that we had. So I want to bring that up. So one of the issues you have is that you're not spending enough on stuff like cybersecurity, which would include training for staff in cybersecurity issues. And now we have the pandemic happening. So we have the risk and concerns of a remote workforce, but then in addition to that, we now have potential budget cuts. And when we have potential budget cuts, this idea of 2% of the IT budget being spent on cybersecurity, getting more to be spent on cybersecurity is going to be much more difficult. Not that it's not happening, but that organizations are having issues with that. So that revenue shortfall is what I was kind of talking about there. Not everyone falls into this bucket. We've seen a number of districts where their money doesn't come from sales tax, and they're still, people still pay for their water bill, right? So some of those things, or they have money coming from different organizations. So they're not necessarily, not everybody's in the same issue of having a revenue shortfall. And then we have continued targets for cyber criminals. So they continue to do ransomware and other types of things. And so that's actually up during this pandemic. And so what a lot of people find, or what I even find as an auditor, is oftentimes the city or the district is asking way too much for the IT staff. They're trying to do everything, and they can't do everything. So we want to make sure we prioritize cybersecurity during these budget cuts if we can. And that's the current situation. So there was a question came in and says, if in your certification section, I would be interested in hearing about the CISM cert, and is there a better option for me as a manager than a CISP? Yes, there's a couple different things, and we will get to that question here in a little bit. I just saw this quote just like the other day, and I said, hey, this is kind of actually really relevant to this. And it says, we are living through a crisis with no modern day precedents. And I think we all realize that. Organizations of every size and type, from businesses to governments, to hospitals to schools, to faith communities and nonprofit organizations, need leaders. We need people who can help others overcome their weakness and fear and come together to do better, more difficult things than any one of us could do on our own. And I think that this is really kind of an important concept. And I don't know if Rob has an opinion on this, but the idea that nobody does anything alone, right? There's always a team. There's always some kind of collaboration. There's always someone else there to help you, someone else that you can bounce ideas off of. That becomes an important part of us being leaders, even in cybersecurity, but just even for our staff. Being a manager and being a leader is two different things, right? And I think what we really need right now is more leaders, less managers. Not that we don't need managers. I mean, we still need them, but I'm not saying we need more management. What we need is more leadership, and that is guiding other individuals, guiding your staff in their career paths, and helping encourage them to seek out more training for areas that they may have a deficit in as far as skill sets. You have anything to add with that, Rob?
No, that's pretty much spot on, I think.
And that's a good example of us having teamwork. I said something and he said it was spot on, so it makes me feel better. Anyways, so I have a question for you guys, and you can put this in the question area. It says, what are the goals of Information Technology Department? So what are your goals? If you think about it, what are the goals of IT in general? What are your goals? So I'll wait for you guys to give you just a minute to put something into the question area. Some people say, well, you know, it's about making things effective, helping people work. Now we're waiting for some, well, you guys are an audience that are tired this morning. There's a lot of you online, but nobody's posting anything. So I'll just go on to the next one. Maybe you're not interested in the question. The way we look at goals for IT, and if I get any questions, I'll come back to it. The way we look at it from an auditing perspective is that there's two things, and I like to keep it down to two things, because if it's two things, it's easy to remember, it's easy to relate, it's easy to then bring to other non-technical people to say, hey, these are the two things we're trying to do. This is the two things we're trying to accomplish, and they're not controversial at all. They're not anything that your city manager or general manager is going to say, no, that's not important. Someone did say provide service to the organization. That's absolutely true. And I would take that comment and I would stick it under my first topic here, and that is, do we ensure that information and technology bring value to the organization? Another one came in just a second ago, comment, secure the data and protect the org. That actually fits under my second topic here, that ensure that cyber risks related to information technology are mitigated. So these are the two main goals that we want to have. Another one just came in, support staff through technology, and through missing technology. So I guess you're saying that they don't have it, and what do they need to have? So that kind of gets back to the bring value to the organization, right? So everybody can understand. Another one is support. So if you want to support, or you want to make sure you have service, all that, that's bringing value to the organization. And so we always kind of like look at it. Those are my two big buckets. Everything else kind of fits into those two big buckets. And that's a really good delineation. You can come up with IT goals and you come up with a list of 15 different items and all that, but that is hard to communicate to stakeholders. You want to have a very clear message to stakeholders about, you know, why you need more staff if you need more staff, and you want to get back to, we want to make sure that we bring value to the organization. If we don't have enough staff, we cannot bring value to the organization. All we're going to do is keep things going, or if we don't have enough staff, we are not going to be able to mitigate those risks. And one thing that I always do, if you watch any of my other slides or my other presentations, we talk about cyber risks, but I typically, and I'm talking to a technical audience, so I'm talking this way, but if I was talking to city manager or finance director or someone along those lines, what I would say is business risks related to information and technology, right? Because they need to understand that it's their risk for them to be able to continue to meet their mission, whatever it is. So you have to translate that sometimes. So two big goals. And so what are some of your challenges with IT staffing is my next question. And then I'll let you guys put some answers in that, and we'll come back to it with whatever you guys post in there. There might be a delay or something. So what have I seen as an auditor when we come in to an organization? What are some of the challenges that we find? And oftentimes what we find is that there is a lack of staff. I mean, that seems to be pretty much 86% of my clients are local governments, and over the years, and always lack of staff seems to be the issue. Now, of course, there's the whole idea of business and business theory is you have limited resources, and how do you get the most out of those limited resources? And part of that is, do we invest in more staff, or do we invest in making the staff that we have execute more efficiently? So there's two different ways of looking at it. Either one of those costs money. Which one is going to cost the least amount for the organization or give the organization the biggest benefit? So some of that becomes, when we look at the challenges, kind of trying to figure out that. Support for management seems to be a common issue. And what I have found, we've gone into a couple local governments to see how IT is structured, to kind of see if there was ways to make it more efficient or anything along those lines. And what we found is that oftentimes the head of IT, whether it's IT director or manager, is too far removed from the city manager or the decision makers. And that makes it very difficult for those individuals to affect any change within an organization. In most organizations, let's talk about corporate organizations outside of government side of things. There is a CIO, and that CIO is a true executive in the organization. In other words, that person sits at the highest level with the CEO, CFO, COO, all the C-suite stuff. I go to a lot of local governments, and they may give somebody the title CIO, but they're not really a CIO. And I had one guy whose title should be like manager, and they called him a CISO, and there's a lot of issues with that because their term for it was not a Chief Information Security Officer, which is a known, term in HR that everybody knows what that title means. This person was a manager who reported to finance, and then finance reported to administrative services, and administrative services then reported to the city manager. That person is 4 miles down the road, so they're definitely not a chief anything, right? They certainly are not an officer of the organization. So sometimes when you find stuff like that, and I brought that up to them, I said, this person is a manager. That person, if you want to have a chief officer, needs to be at the table where those decisions are being made, and it's not happening, right? So, and I just got somebody say exactly with an exclamation mark. Oh, and whoever that is that we probably talked to said that's me. So I'm not saying who the organization is. But anyways, you want to make sure that, here's one thing that I would take away from this. Your organization, I would suggest that you use industry standard titles for things. If you're a manager, call you a manager. If you're a director, call you a director. If you're a C something, call you C something, CIO, CISO. If it matches with everything else, it's going to hinder your career in the future if you ever have to look for another job, because they're going to be like, oh, that person doesn't belong. That person is not a CIO or whatever it is. So you want to kind of look at that. Staff lacking critical skills. Some of the critical skills that we find missing, and I've done talks on this a number of times, working at a community college, we work with local governments, we work with federal government if we have one in our area. When I worked at Las Positas, we worked with Lawrence Livermore Lab and Sandia National Lab, and they would come to us and say, these are the skills that we want to make sure people we hire in IT have. The biggest request always has been soft skills, and that one still seems to be missing. The ability for someone to talk technically or talk in a technical manner to non-technical individuals seems to be missing. Also, just personality skills. I get things like, these people don't have proper hygiene, so those are some of the comments that we get, and so part of it's a little bit of an expectation, right? Most of us are geeky, nerdy people, and so geeky, nerdy people are generally not very, socially. Sometimes we're socially awkward, I guess, is a good way to put it. It's nice when you hang out with only IT people, because then you can be socially awkward in the way you talk and how you act, and nobody bothers you. But unfortunately, when the business, they want something a little bit more polished. They want something a little bit different. Another challenge, of course, is managing remotely, which we've talked about. So a couple comments that did come on. We have no in-house IT. We are currently accepting bids for IT managed services to improve the systems and standards. So that's an interesting point. So if you don't have IT staff, do you outsource it? And this is a good question. Is like, what should you look for in those outsourced folks? So some of the things I'm going to talk about here are going to be pertinent to that. You want to make sure that the people that you get are qualified and certified on the systems that they're going to support. If they're supporting Cisco routers, they should be Cisco certified. If you're hiring them to do this for you. If the federal government requires it at this point in time. So if you're going to work in the federal government in most agencies, definitely in the Department of Defense and also State Department, you're required to be certified on anything that you touch. So if you're touching a Windows server, you need to be certified on Windows Server. If you're doing cybersecurity related items, you have to have one of the cybersecurity certifications, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Right now, departments are doing whatever they want in the name of innovation, and it's overburdening our staff. Good thing. So that's an important challenge. I think in that challenge, what I would try to do is try to insert yourself into the conversation to make sure that they don't make an innovation decision that actually ends up burdening you. You can throw that under the idea that you need to do a risk assessment to make sure that it does not increase the risk of the local government for doing that. So that was how I would approach that. Get your boss in on that and let them understand that. And if you need an auditor to come and talk about it, I can definitely do that. That's a very important thing, actually. IT and the end user department need to work together on any new information or technology innovations that you're going to have to make sure, for one, to make sure it works with the systems you have. Two, that you're not wasting money on something you may already have. I had a number of local governments. They have Microsoft Teams because they have Office 365. They use Office 365 primarily for Office Suite and Outlook or Exchange to get rid of their in-house Exchange and move to Office 365. And then when it came to question is like, we need to do web conferences, they were like, oh, what are we going to buy? And they go out and buy Zoom, which had some security and privacy issues, which was probably not a good idea. Supposedly they fixed them, but I don't know that anybody's audited them to verify that those things have been fixed. But, so I don't want to throw them under the bus. My point being is you already had something in place that could meet the needs of staff that's already paid for, no budget required for it because it's already paid for, and then they go out and buy something else. So that becomes one of those issues where if you're not at the table with other departments making those decisions, things get missed. I have 1,000 examples of that, and I can't go into all of them, but so that is a problem that I see a lot of people have. Staffing challenges, another comment, finding good balance in technical ability and customer support, also what's considered within the scope of IT, computing, facilities, project management, etc. That's a good one, getting that scope down. Recruiting and hiring great people and retaining them. Everything on this list. With COVID, I'm thinking that we can just secure technology purchases and get reimbursed via the CARES Act. That I'm not sure if that falls under that. That might be more of a finance question to find out if they know that the answer to that. Provide update systems to staff to improve functionality and stay current with technology and cybersecurity standards. I'm actually going to talk about trying to keep up to date with cybersecurity stuff here in just a second, because I think it is part of one of the challenges that we're going to have. And this is a perfect segue right into it, so thank you for that question. So there's a thing called a body of knowledge. For information technology, there's a body of knowledge about how to set up, implement, maintain, and then you do the sunset phase of any technology. And then you have cybersecurity side of things. There are two different bodies of knowledge. And I don't think and Rob, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you're probably you're the unicorn in the room that probably can fit in both of those categories completely. But for information technology, there's so much knowledge if you want to get into really information technology. If you just want to be a subject matter expert on Azure or Windows Server or Linux or whatever it is that you want, there's some of that's going to be cybersecurity related, but there's a whole bunch that has nothing to do with cybersecurity, right? On the cybersecurity side, there's so much stuff that you have to cover that is not necessarily covered in information technology. So just because you're a technologist or you've been working in information technology doesn't mean that everything you need to know is you already have access to. One of the things that I kind of brought up, and is one of them, it says, I'm in IT, I can handle cybersecurity. I'm like, okay, well, what about compliance? What about forensics? What about, ethical hacking? All those different knowledge sets that you can have on the cybersecurity side of things are beyond what you have in information technology. Yes, there's common ground. There's a lot of common ground. We both need to understand how TCP/IP works, right? We both need to know how DNS works and all that stuff. On the cybersecurity side, not so much on how to configure it or manage it and all that kind of stuff, other than perhaps some configuration to make it more secure. So there is some overlap, but there's not all overlap. So just because you are in information technology, if you want to gain and go into cybersecurity, you're in a great place because you have a lot of the foundational knowledge. But you're going to see, if you go into a CISSP or a CISM, you're going to see that there's a lot of stuff that you were not even aware of stuff that you're like, oh, I didn't realize that, there's this whole idea of preservation of evidence in the event that something got hacked. From an information technology standpoint, you're just like, how do I fix this thing and get it running again? From the cybersecurity side, thinking that way, you're going to be saying, oh, what do I need to do to protect evidence? Do I need to protect evidence, or is getting back into service more important to the organization? So there's these two different bodies of knowledge. I just want to make sure everybody understands that, and that if you get into cybersecurity, great that you come from information technology. It's probably the best place to come from. But also know that there's a bunch of new stuff you're going to learn. And again, some of it's going to be, a lot of it's going to overlap. Somebody asked, our team was actually referred to as propeller heads in a closed door meeting. Yeah, unfortunately. So we got to work on that, right? Yeah, we're propeller heads. I personally like technology wizard, but propeller heads, I guess. I don't know if that's demeaning or if that was meant with respect or what it is. Anyways, there is something that I've learned in my career, even where I work, and that is perception. The rest of the organization's perception of IT. And we actually went through an assessment recently. It was an end user satisfaction assessment, and they actually came in, sent out a questionnaire. Everybody answered the questionnaire. We got the feedback back, and then we were able to look at it to kind of see how the rest of the organization looked at us. And it was done in an anonymous way so that we didn't know necessarily who made the comments or all that stuff. We actually did quite well in our assessment. We scored higher on all the metrics than the industry in general. Peers, in other words, other accounting firms, because I work for an accounting firm, with other accounting firms, we scored higher on every metric except for one. So we thought that was really good. I thought it was really good. In some places, we were 39% higher than the industry average. So I was like, yes. Other areas were only 5% better. And I'm like, well, those are areas we need to work on. One of the things, and this kind of comes up a little bit, one of the questions is what belongs to IT and what doesn't belong to IT. We got a question saying that we needed to provide more training. And currently where I work, we only get 2 hours of training to give to staff a year. They give us 2 hours and they say, here, you have 2 hours, and it's twice a year. So it's 1 hour at the beginning of the year, 1 hour at the end of the year. And that's what we get to do the training. So we focus in on training on like how to do, password management, the regular cybersecurity stuff. How to use Microsoft Teams. We ended up having to do that one because we had Teams, and because of COVID, everybody started switching to that. So, and there's that class, essentially that class is here on Bright Talk channel. So if you look back, you can see that it's perfectly acceptable for end users to watch it. In fact, I think it was one of our most watched webinars to date. So check that out. If you have staff that says, hey, we need training for Teams, you don't have to do it. You can just send them someplace else. But what it ends up turning out is the training they were looking for are their line of business applications that as IT I support, but I don't know how they do their work in those things. I know how the audit one works because I use that application when I'm doing the audit, but on the tax preparation side, they use a program called LaCert, which is their tax preparation software. I know how to install it. I know how to configure the printer on it. I know how to support it, update it, and do all that stuff, or my staff does. But we have no idea how to fill out a Form 1040. And it turns out that's the training they were looking for, and they're expecting IT to do that training. So this is an expectation that we haven't managed, and again, perception that we talked about. We need to make sure that we manage their expectations on what we can and can't do, and where we're in charge and what we're responsible for and what they need to be responsible for. I told my staff, I said, okay, this is an opportunity for us. Instead of just saying, hey, you need to go find the training yourself, I said, we can act as a concierge. We can take that idea of customer service, because my staff didn't want to have anything to do with it. They just wanted to, tell them all, just, go find your own. And I said, no, let's just be let's be the concierge. If you go into Las Vegas and you drop $10,000 or $100,000 and say you're going to go gambling, the concierge will get you anything you want, right? So think of it that way. I told him, I said, we bring more value to the organization when we support them in those things. This is just how I decided that we should deal with that issue, and that is we would reach out to all of those vendors, since we know them all, and ask them about what training they have available. We're actually going to do it for all of our software, and then we're going to publish an article or something we'll put on our internal website that basically says, if you're looking for training in these things, here's where you can go to get it. We're not doing it, but now we're providing them with the information. And now we've also added to the whole process, because of this, that anytime we implement any new software, training is automatically going to be a part of the initiation process. What training do we need? And how do we get training ongoing when new employees join? We also started enabling them to learn how to do their own training. And so we said, let's take knowledgeable staff that are in these areas and let them do the training by showing them how they can do it in Microsoft Teams. You can do it with Zoom, you can do it with WebEx. They all have the capability of recording a meeting. Well, you can do the training, you can share your desktop, record it. We show them how that if you have Office 365, the videos automatically get put up in stream, how to set up channels in there, and then how to share the videos to the whole entire staff, so that we have now just-in-time training when people need information about it. And we try to tell them to make the videos short, like 2 to 5 minutes long, like how to set up a printer in LaCert. Okay, here's how you do it. How to fill out this form. Here's how you do it. And so we try to do that as a training, coming up with a knowledge base, and we're starting to get staff interested in that. And some of my staff has been interested into it and is working on some of those videos. So, like how to make a Outlook signature, right? Typically something that, people copy and paste, but some people want to customize. So we're doing a little 5-minute video showing them how to do that. So that's kind of what we're working on, how to share files in Teams if you've got a Teams channel. A lot of really cool stuff. It says, here's another question. What appropriate level of certification for a generalist? Think 2-person IT shop. It's not practically certified in everything. We touch everything. What's reasonable? Good question. I'd have to know probably a little bit more about like what are you supporting, but generally, generally in most situations, I've done very well having a Microsoft certification in the server and the workstation side. So I have certifications in server and Windows 10. Well, not in 10. I was in Windows 7 and I gave up on it because I can't. I'm on the cybersecurity side of things, and keeping up with the green side on this list was really hard. So I stopped at Windows 7, continuing to get certifications. But I kept up to date with the Windows 10 stuff. And a lot of what you do in 7 is in 10. So anyways, you're right. It's not practically a Cisco certified. So you have to kind of figure out what's the biggest area of need. You're going to have a lot more workstations than anything else. Then you're going to have switches and routers and all that kind of stuff. And then you're going to have a lot of additional servers that probably need to be handled. So working on making sure you're certified on those things. Knowledge in the other areas like Linux and Cisco are a plus, but not necessary. because typically you set up the routers, or you have somebody else set the routers up. If you're only a 2-person team, you have somebody else set the routers up. You call them if you have a thing. We are not certified. None of my staff is certified on our phone system. We have an Avaya phone system, and we have support for that, and that's why we do that. We used to manage our own Exchange server, and I was the person that was certified on it. I was the person that maintained it because my staff was busy with other things. So what we ended up doing is I said, I can't keep up with this because cybersecurity is taking all my time. So we basically outsourced it using Office 365. Now nobody really needs to be certified on Exchange anymore. Somebody needs to know how to manage Office 365 and do it securely, but that's a different issue altogether. What we find, and what the industry finds in general, is typically one person is responsible for too many processes within an organization. So what are the results of that one big issue? And that is that there's not enough bandwidth to effectively manage whatever it is that they work on. Processes go unmanaged. Prevention or improving critical processes is preventing people from improving the critical processes that you have. Unclear process ownership. Who owns this process, right? Underperformance, dissatisfaction from end users, and then sometimes something critical is missed that changes your compliance status or opens you up to risk. Those types of things, because the one person is got too much on their plate. So when we look at governance of information and technology, and notice we don't say governance, IT governance anymore. We say governance of information and technology, and that we change that word. What we do is not different. We just do that to be more business friendly, business speak friendly, whatever, because they understand information, right? And they understand that there's technology. And we don't want city managers and the such to say, oh, IT governance, that's an IT thing, because IT governance is actually their thing and what they need to do. But anyways, so in a governance structure, you actually take security and you separate it from IT. And there's a lot of reasons for this. There's a lot of risks that get addressed by doing that. But one of them is that overload of one individual having too much responsibility on their plate. So the CIO, or the information technologies director or manager, whoever's the head of IT, their job is to ensure value is brought to the organization. So service and value is kind of their thing. CISO, dealing with the cybersecurity, the risk and compliance aspect of it, ensuring that risks are identified and addressed. So that's more the safety security side of things. Again, remember earlier I said that those two knowledge areas are overlap quite a bit, but they are still separate. And we don't want to have one individual be responsible for everything. In addition to these things are sometimes at odds with each other and need to be balanced. They need to be balanced in light of what is best for the city, the organization, the district, the business. And so somebody usually above that may need to make the call if you have these two different levels, if you have this actually set up in there. So if you have a CIO or a CISO or an IT director, cybersecurity director, you can then ensure that you get this separation, and you're also not putting too much strain on one individual. Because the idea that you have to maintain your Windows certification or your Cisco certification or whatever other certification you may have, in addition to getting a CISM, CISSP, CRISC certification, is going to be very difficult for one person to do. There's only so much time in a day. You can talk to my friend Rob. Rob, how many certifications do you have?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, no, because I know it's ridiculous. That's why I want to make a point.
So I think the total number right now is about 168 total. But mind you, you have to put it into this context, right? As a Microsoft certified trainer, for example, and being certified as a trainer for several other different vendors, all of those vendors maintain the same approach to their instructor pool, and that is if you're going to teach a particular topic, you have to be certified in that topic. So I have to go down and I have to become proficient in the technology that I'm going to prepare to deliver an instruction set on. I have to become certified in that technology, so I end up getting that proficiency. Yes, it's hard work. Yes, you spend a lot of time outside of your normal work time going through that process. Generally, I tend to take about 2 or 3 certifications a year, and that's kind of where I'm living now because just like you mentioned earlier, I've bridged the gap and I've moved predominantly more from the IT side of things and more towards the cybersecurity things. So most of the knowledge that I have on the IT side of things, I generally just upkeep. And a lot of vendors like Microsoft, for example, the Server 2019 and the like SQL, they don't have matching certifications anymore for them. They moved to a role-based, and this is something that I wanted to kind of briefly mention to a previous statement. Somebody asked, in terms of being a 2-person IT shop and what's an appropriate level of certification, it really depends on what the shop is doing. If you are moving into a cloud-hosted platform, right? So think of, let's say, Azure or AWS, you'll probably want to be certified on that technology. So in the case of Azure, you want to become an Azure administrator, right? That gives you the skill sets that you can administer the majority of your servers and infrastructure and, whatever 138 different categories there are on that platform, right? The goal there is you can leverage the skill set that you have from administering a server, and it's now kind of transitioned to a cloud service provider where some of those tasks are no longer needed by an admin, right? As an example, they have different technologies that are built into the cloud service provider that kind of take care of those roles. So, to answer that question, it's really fundamentally what is it you're currently doing? Where do you see the organization moving from a strategic standpoint, and then mapping your goals for certification against that?
Right. I agree with you on that. Yeah, I agree with that. Another question came in that said, what's a beginning certification for a non-IT professional that could be most valuable to a small government with no IT staff on site? Which one are you kind of thinking of? I'm thinking that CompTIA has the IT fundamentals course.
Sure. That's a good one. And that covers...
Yeah. Go ahead.
That covers IT fundamentals plus like what used to be classified as the Green Initiative. So they kind of bundled those two things together into that particular track. And it's a really good one. And like I said, it covers a good fundamental knowledge for, case in point, non-IT professionals who are in that space, right? Meaning they have to become, somewhat proficient or at least understand at some basic level the IT infrastructure.
And I'm not sure of anything else that's really, there's other ones that are peripheral to IT that a lot of IT people will have, like ITIL, which is more about process. So you don't really have to understand IT to understand how ITIL works, but that's really just about how you set up processes and service delivery. And that one, my wife works for a data center, but she's not in IT. She manages a program and works with the facilities engineers, and they use ITIL as well. So ITIL actually is useful for other things other than IT in a lot of people. So it's very generic. It's not really IT related, but it does talk about all the stuff that I, as a governance person, would like you to be doing for IT related stuff, for the maintenance side of things and service delivery. To speak a little bit more about the CISO that I'm going to talk about at this point in time, or whoever is going to be in charge of your cybersecurity, if you can get that, typically you want to have an executive level manager do it. The lower you go down the chain, you still end up with the risk that the risks are not known to the right people. My philosophy is the finance director should make the ultimate decision on what financial application they should be using. However, I believe that it is a shared responsibility and that IT needs to be at the table when they're making those decisions to make sure, one, it's compatible, it works with your systems, what is the total cost of ownership going to be, what does it cost to maintain this, and then security needs to be at the table to make sure that they understand what the risks are. Is there a change to compliance, especially when you deal with PCI or credit card compliance? You want to make sure that somebody's at the table who understands how that changes your compliance structure. I get consulted all the time from local governments call me and says, hey, we're looking at something new that is going to take, utility payments, or, they're changing a class system for, Parks and Rec. Can you kind of look at this and tell us what the best solution is to maintain PCI compliance or be PCI compliant? So those types of things come up, and that person needs to be at that position that can be called upon to do it, or you need to outsource it to somebody who knows those areas. So their role is kind of the governance of IT, cybersecurity risk management, IT compliance, IT assessment and audit, cybersecurity awareness, and related policies. So their job role is kind of like a higher level, more management role. They're not the boots on the ground that are monitoring the firewall rules and responding to those types of things. Those are different roles. Those roles may report up to this position, but generally this head of cybersecurity is really working on the governance side of stuff. And so just a couple of different things, typical responsibilities. They got to look at the strategy and the enterprise-wide information security or cybersecurity. They got to look at the policies and procedures that are in place and really come up with those critical changes necessary to mitigate risks. And they're going to oversee those areas. Part of that is also, it says lead security strategy, but it also is really, this comes more from management books than anything that cybersecurity people are publishing right now. You got to be like an ambassador for cybersecurity. You got to talk it all the time. Every time you get a chance to talk about it, you got to talk about it. And again, it's really easy when it's 2 points. You want to make sure IT brings value to the organization. You want to make sure risks are mitigated. You can say that 1,000 different ways to different people to keep on sending that message to them, because they have to have buy-in on why you are telling them not to get that software versus another software, why not using this one versus another one. You want to be their confidant. Some organizations, even they'll call people like evangelists, and the idea is you're going out and promoting something. You're promoting cybersecurity if that's the case, and you need to do that within the entire organization. So part of that means you need to build strong relationships across the enterprise. You have to partner closely with senior leadership. You have to make sure they understand what the strategy is, that they give you feedback on what they're looking for and what's important to them. Make sure that they understand the regulatory and compliance areas by making sure that you're up to date on all those items. And then monitor governance, risk, and compliance going forward. Some of these individuals will also deal with some of the physical security, and it kind of just depends. A lot of times organizations don't have separate physical security people. I know in some cities they just make the police chief in charge of all that stuff, or maintenance in charge of all the keys to everything. But once it goes from there to having closed circuit TVs and having key card access and all that kind of stuff, then it might be worth looking at maybe that, because it's getting more and more on the network and all that stuff. Maybe have the CISO take over some of those functions, or at least oversee those functions to ensure they're doing things. Whoever this person ends up being, whether it's director or manager or whatever, they're going to have to work closely with the city manager, administrative services, head of IT, risk management, human resources, head of finance, and other stakeholders. Part of one of the things I read on an article on a blog, it says, hey, if you're a CISO, you need to get out of your office. You need to do, what they call it, foot marketing or something, walking marketing or something like that. In other words, they tell you, you get out of your house and walk around. You need to go and talk to people, find out what their needs and concerns are, and make sure that you're addressing those as well. And for a lot of geeky, nerdy propeller heads, air quotes, sometimes that's not necessarily in our wheelhouse to want to go talk to everybody, but that becomes critical for pushing initiatives and getting more than 2% of a budget geared towards cybersecurity. So those are the things to consider. You can download the slides if you want to look at these. There's a bunch of things to download and look at that we've posted. There's a lot of this stuff that you can, if your organization, because I actually have 3 or 4 clients that are now initiating that type of position. So that's good. Or if you're going to outsource it with like a CISO as a service or whatever a lot of organizations are doing, what you want to kind of look for to have them do. So I put that up there. so you can look at those slides later. So security intelligence, part of what they need to do is maintain and train staff on security measures and processes and procedures that are going to be more secure than the current ones they have. Monitor threats is a big one. Like, I don't know how many emails you get a day, but my inbox is completely full with, Department of Homeland Security advisory notes, Cisco's updates, and everybody else's, security news feeds I sign up for. And there's a lot of stuff that comes across my desk every day that I'm like, holy crap, how am I going to deal with all this stuff? And then I have to interpret all of that and say, okay, what's most important for staff to know, the IT staff, and then what's most important for my clients to know. I just had one. If you're one of my clients, you probably got an email from me the other day. And if you didn't, it's because I ran out of time. There was a new phishing type of attack that's going on where people call saying they're from support, talking to them about, hey, we need your username and password because we're having an issue logging you into the office because they're assuming people are working from home. And so they're doing it to get credentials, and they get the credentials, and then they log in, and they're inside the organization. So that one seemed to be critical to me. So we forwarded that to our the clients that we do cybersecurity consultant for. We forwarded that to them because we felt that that was important that they understood that as well. Because again, a lot of stuff comes across your desk, and you got to figure out what's important. You don't want to spam people, because if you do, they're not going to listen. They will just you will train them to ignore your emails if you spam them. So anytime you send something, it has to be very specific on what it is and what they need to do, and very clearly communicated. This one just talks about like an analyst perspective, and basically says that the CISO has to have their pulse on the finger of what the business is doing. Anyways, so what are some of the benefits you get from having this governance structure, or if you have, a CISO or someone equivalent to that in an organization? You get increased alignment between security and business objectives, because that's our whole goal, is to make sure that security is meeting the mission and objectives of the city or district, or county for that matter. So you want to develop the information security that is elastic, nimble, flexible to the business. In other words, we don't want to be the people to say no all the time. And it's hard as a cybersecurity person because oftentimes we want to say no. Instead, I have to step back and say, okay, they need to get something done. What are they trying to do? So now when I get a department head calls me or something like that and says, hey, we need this, or how do I do this? I always follow up with another question. What are you trying to accomplish? That's the question I ask. What are you trying to accomplish? I said, walk me through it. What is your process that you're using now? Where's the hiccup? And then I'll answer your question. Because sometimes it's like, well, how do I do tasks in Outlook? So I was like, okay, well, what are you trying to do? And then they explain to me what they're doing. I'm like, oh, the reason why it's not working for you is tasks aren't the right tool to use in Outlook to do this. Here's another idea of how you can meet that same objective in a different way. So asking that extra question to kind of figure out what they're trying to accomplish, then you can that can help in other areas other than the example I just gave. We want to reduce waste. We want to make sure that we have secure innovations in technology, not just runaway innovations. And then we want to have that true synergy between security and business stakeholders. And that the goals of everybody are met, right? That the goals in IT can bring value and support to the organization, but that also we can mitigate the risks. So that's what the benefits are if we implement those types of things. There's different types of, CISO. Some are going to be more reactive, focus on protecting the current state. They're not going to be as proactive. They're not going to be looking towards the future. They're not going to be trying to engage the business in design decisions at the beginning. And that requires that you insert yourself at that process. So in organizations where we do CISO as a service, one of the things that we focus in on, one of the first policy change we recommend is that in the procurement process of all things, during the procurement process, that a cyber risk assessment is completed before it can proceed. In other words, nobody can buy any technology until it's been reviewed for cybersecurity. Up to us on how deep that review has to be, If it's a minor change, we can say, okay, this is a tabletop review. In other words, I look at it, okay, this seems reasonable, forward it on. To a whole risk assessment being done either by an outside party or testing that needs to be done internally, or vetting of the vendor at the appropriate level for security aspects before we move on to the next stage. So that's being more proactive. That's really speaking to their language, because you're saying, hey, we want to mitigate the business risks. Yeah, I say cyber risk, but when I'm talking to them, I say business risk, because I want to make sure that they understand that they have a mission to accomplish. I get it. How do we make sure that you can do that mission without any adverse effects impacting it? Got to collaborate with everybody. So I kind of already talked about that. You work closely with these folks, but you have to have collaboration skills. This is one of those soft skills that the businesses and organizations are often asking that we train IT staff in, is that how do they collaborate with other individuals? If they don't collaborate with themselves, they're not going to collaborate with people outside the IT organization. So you want to make sure that they are doing those things. So how can you make sure that that happens? And that's about, and in your collaboration is going to be individual to the different people that you're working with, and making sure that they understand that you're there to help, right? And not there to tell them no. Now, structure becomes an issue, and that is, who does the CIO report to? Who does the CISO report to? And remember, I said they should be separate. There's a separation of duties aspect there that in cybersecurity is that you have to have checks and balances, right? That's why we have a government that has 3 branches, checks and balances. Same idea here. We need to have those checks and balances between cybersecurity and IT. So the most mature structures have those two separate, and they both report to the same individual. In the corporate speak, that would be the CIO reports to the CEO, and the CISO reports also to the CEO. In the past, a lot of times you'd have the CISO reporting to the CIO. And a lot of federal agencies has picked that up because, again, line of business folks did not want to be involved with technical stuff. And that's because the CISOs and CIOs were having this difficulty of, translating everything into business speak or business risk. So they kind of just lumped them together. And then what we ended up finding is that immature, which is actually, if I go down to the next level, it is where the CISO reports to the CIO, is that the CIO always trumps whatever cybersecurity is trying to do. So if those two things are at odds with one another, what wins? What the CIO wants, not necessarily what is the secure thing to do. Or they filter, and I've seen this even in clients of mine, that the IT manager would report to the administrative services director, and that administrative services director would not forward the information on to the city manager. That person would actually filter what the city manager would get so that that person could get the results that they wanted, what they thought was important, and not necessarily faithfully deliver the message that came either from cybersecurity or from the IT folks. And so when that person actually left and the IT folks had to report directly to the city manager, they both, the city manager and the IT director, had a rude awakening that, oh my gosh, we are on the same page on a lot of things, but I was told that you were not, right? So is that a fault of, and you could say, well, that's just that person, right? That structure would still work. If there's, again, yes, it can work that way, but there's a risk. There's a risk that there's filtering, whether it's unconscious bias or whether it's actually, in that case, I thought a little bit malicious because the information wasn't being passed on. It wasn't being transparent. So this is like a medium maturity structure. Again, risks are higher. And then even lower down the chain, where cybersecurity is doing very little. And this one is lower maturity because they don't really have a lot on their plate, or it's not integrated with all the other functions. Let me go back one. In this one, they have a lot more functions that report up to the CISO that are related to security. And in this one, it's just basically a low level, just keep things secure as best you can. So questions always come up, do you insource or outsource it? There's risks either way, right? So, or there's impacts to the business either way. If you insource it, you have a full-time equivalent employee, the cost is going to be more expensive. However, there's better integration with the end units. People can stop by and ask questions. That person can do that. Get up and walk around and talk to people. So there's better collaboration. However, one of the risks you're going to find is it's hard to find a unicorn. And what do I mean by that? I see some of these CISO job postings, and they want somebody who's a CISM and is a certified ethical hacker and can do pen testing. And I'm like, who wrote this job description? Because that, first of all, you're asking for a unicorn. There's only like one or two of those, and they probably are well paid, employed someplace else. So you're not gonna find them. Second, that's again two different sets of knowledge sets. How to manage and govern security versus how to do one particular item when that thing, like ethical hacking or pen testing or whatever it is another thing. There's a difference in technical levels, but there's also just a difference in knowledge base too. So I would say that CISO is more managerial, more people related, and then something like an ethical hacker is more technical and less people oriented, right? So their jobs are kind of fit into those categories. If you outsource it, it's only going to be part-time, so the risk is that you're not going to have the person when you need them because they may be doing it somebody else. However, that you can have flexibility on how much time you use with them. You do have economies of scale. If you outsource it and they also provide the same services for other local governments, for them it's much more efficient because they've already done it for another local government. Doing it for you is just a little bit easier. And it's cheaper to share a unicorn than trying to find one, right? And you can augment your existing capabilities. And sometimes it's a lot easier when you get somebody from outside your organization telling you what needs to be done than when you try to deliver the message of what needs to be done. And they call that the 50-mile radius. If you call a consultant that's more than 50 miles away, I don't know, it's just a saying that people have, that when they'll listen to what that person has to say versus listening to staff. I've been called as the auditor for some of my clients, and they say, hey, I told management this, and they don't believe me. Is this true? And I'm like, well, absolutely. I ask more questions, make sure, because I can't just say yes to things. I got to understand the situation, and then I can say, yes, according to standards, this is the way things are supposed to be, or according to industry statistics, this is the way the best do it, or this is the risks that you have if you don't do that. So I can speak to those types of things. So I get called to do that, and then I call in, I talk to the city manager or whoever, and I say, and they want to know, and they ask the question, what do we do about this? And I say, well, here's your options, and in all of these options, here's the risks, and here's the benefits, and whatever. And then they end up going with what staff had already told them. Now, I don't know if this is just like, oh, I feel assured that my staff knows what they're talking about because this outside person told me this. If that is the case, then you have a PR issue with inside your own organization. In other words, there's a lack of trust, maybe. Maybe there's a lack of confidence in the abilities of IT, or maybe it's just a bias that they have. Whatever it is, it's something you probably want to work on. You want them to have confidence in what you're doing in order for them to trust what you're going to say. And even sometimes if they do, they don't always do it. So changing topics. Did you have anything to add to that, Rob? I don't want to talk all day. But.
No, that's pretty much spot on. That's a big issue that you're going to run into quite frequently.
Go ahead.
Well, it's the fact that, your IT staff may be, as an example, you have a group that, because of their certifications and their requirements for continuing education, so they invest in themselves by learning new technologies, keeping up on, vulnerabilities or what have you. And like you said, management comes to them, they give them an answer, management goes, and like you said, they'll go call somebody else, and that other person, the consultant, will tell them exactly the same thing, and they'll believe the consultant. And again, it goes back to like you were saying, is it an issue of trust within the group, or is it a thing of, maybe that employee has been embedded within, the organization for X number of years, and they don't fully, the perception is that the employee doesn't fully understand what nuances or new avenues of X, Y, or Z are coming down the pipe from an external perspective. Whereas a consultant, the perception is that's the space they live in because they're dealing with, so many different systems and organizations that they have a better understanding of what's affecting them from an outside perspective. So,
well, yeah, part of that too, I think it helps, not to say anything bad for your staff if your staff says, hey, can you check with somebody else outside the organization? Part of that is just to kind of say, I agree with you maybe, but I just want to see how other cities are doing it. So I oftentimes get asked those questions because I'm an auditor, and so, I see 75 to 100 different, local governments a year that I talk with. So I sometimes know what the other ones are doing. Oftentimes people are always asking us what financial systems everybody's using. But anyways, yeah, so some of that, again, that may not be a lack of trust, but it could just be just an issue of, I just want some more reassurance that we're doing the right thing. So moving on to the next topic is IT staffing engagement. And did have a comment, and I'm not going to read it because it's not really towards you, but yes, Ray, I will give you a call. So IT staffing engagement. So what is the level of your staff? How engaged are they in their work? And part of this is like, what is their morale level? And especially right now, when we're dealing with COVID-19, morale in general is down considerably because of the COVID issue. I think sometimes it's also just low. IT oftentimes feels like, people keep on demanding from us. They're not giving us any resources, and now they continue to have the same performance expectations, but the budget is shrinking. So I have less money. I can't do training, but they want me to support X, but I have no training on X. And in addition to all that, cyber risks are increasing. So I know that some cities are talking about furloughs, layoffs, that kind of stuff. In IT, if you're expecting the same level of support and performance, it would be unwise to cut any of the staffing side of things. You can look for software that can be, redundancies in software that can be cut out. If you're paying for Zoom, stop if you have Teams, right? Why are you wasting money on that? Yes, it's different. Yes, everybody thinks Zoom's better or whatever it is, and it's not. I mean, you can do the golden triangle, and you can kind of see that Teams and Zoom are practically the same. It's just getting people to use it. And some people say Teams is too hard to use. I'm like, okay, look, you just go on your calendar, you say create a Teams meeting, and you click the link. How hard is that, right? I have a veterans group that I meet with, and we have to meet remotely now. And I have a 90-year-old Marine who knows how to get onto a Teams meeting from their phone. So if they can do it, everybody can do it, right? So again, that's one of the things that if you're looking to cut budget, cut in areas like that. And this is a good thing too, because you don't want to support two different platforms, right? We had the situation in our organization where it popped up and everybody's like, oh, let's start using Zoom. And I was like, no, let's not, because I don't want to support an extra thing. Not that I didn't want to support it, I don't have to, but my staff didn't want to have to support a second thing. In addition to, at the time, there was privacy and security concerns that I still kind of feel concerned about. Can Teams record like Zoom? Yes, it can. And can you do webinars with Teams? Absolutely. People from outside your organization can join in. They don't even have to have credentials. They can just click on the link in the meeting. So yes, I would invite you on this channel in Bright Talk. There is actual training on Zoom, Teams, and you can watch it there. And Teams has got a bunch of new features that just keep on getting added on, while Zoom has been spending almost all their money trying to fix their security issues. So not a lot of innovation on that side, but because grandma uses Zoom, everybody wants to use Zoom, unfortunately. Not the best technology for the solution, but because it's very popular, In fact, people say Zoom meetings all the time now. So now the word Zoom doesn't even mean, we don't even use webinar or virtual meeting anymore. We just use the word Zoom. And just like when people say you need to search the internet, they use the word Google, and that's just generic for something. Anyways, like Kleenex, that's a specific brand, but everybody uses it as a generic term, unfortunately. Isn't checking with outside agencies a double sword? Yes, it can be. Sometimes it's a sanity check, and other times it changes so rapidly. You know what? One size doesn't fit all. So I kind of agree with you. There is a double-edged sword. Checking with another agency to see what they're doing is great. You can compare yourself with them. But one thing that I suggest, here's my point because we did that industry survey that I said that we did, and it compared us industry overall and then with other accounting firms. And when we do that comparison, there's different numbers, right? Because it's a different sample set. Here's the thing that I found. Local governments in general underperform in cybersecurity to the rest of the world. Sorry. So in other words, you're on the bottom of the bucket. So comparing yourself with other people that are at the bottom of the bucket, is that a good idea? Probably not. Now, so yes, there is that double-edged sword idea, and anytime I get consulted in on that, I kind of try to caution city managers from trying to make that comparison. Well, what is the other city doing? Hey, they're not doing a good job either, so let's not compare with them. Let's compare with best in class, see what they are, and then see if we can make the best decision in there. If you have specialized software that only local governments use, then you have to talk to other ones. Yeah, so it is a double-edged sword. I agree with you on that. So how do you engage your IT staff? So how do you attract and retain the top talent and motivate them to go above and beyond, right? Because they're oftentimes asked to go above and beyond. They always do it. They sometimes grumble when they do it. How do we get them to do it happily? So turnover is a serious threat. However, one benefit that local governments have is people have a longer retention period. Typically, when they get into a local government, they stay there. There's better retirements, typically better benefits, and so a lot of people like to get into there. But the problem that you're having is younger folks don't like that. They're not looking for the stability. They assume that they're going to have to change change their employment, every 2 years. And they're fine with that because they always want to go on to the next better, best thing. They get tired of something, they want to move on. So you have this millennial, this generation gap with them, that they have different ideas about what career means to them than the older generation. And I hate to say that I now feel like I'm the older generation. But my sister-in-law's father just celebrated 45 years working for a school district. That is rare and far between, that somebody stays and works for the same place for 45 years. That's incredible. So another issue we have is it HR's responsibility to kind of keep staff morale up and keep them engaged in everything? Certainly we can work with HR to get some ideas because, again, this is typically not in our wheelhouse. We're dealing with, packets, IP packets and routers and switches all day long. And you keeping things running that, the people skill side of things sometimes gets left off. So how do I keep morale up is one of those issues that sometimes we shouldn't take it for granted to assume that HR is doing those things because they're probably not doing those things. So do you have any type of program to develop an engagement program? How do you engage with employees to keep them connected, especially now that everybody feels very disconnected? People's loneliness and feeling of disconnected is really high with people working from home. So what are the right issues to address in that area is one of the concerns that is starting to grow right now. Dealing with satisfied versus engaged. Some people are just happy. Hey, if somebody's satisfied working here, great. That's good for us. But if you kind of look at the differences between them, and this came from a different study. Sorry that it's hard to read on this because it's probably a little small, but you can make it full screen. But one of the things is people are focusing on what do I get out of it. If they're satisfied, they're just like, what do I get out of it? And if they're not getting anything out of it, what are they going to do? They're going to want to move on, right? And their performance is also going to be like, well, I don't get anything out of this, so I'm going to do the minimal amount necessary to get the job done. I'm not going to try to do the innovation. This person just wanted to be able to do tasks in Outlook. And because they just want to do tasks in Outlook, I'm just going to show them how to do it. Even though there's probably a better way, I'm not going to spend any extra time trying to figure out if there is a better way. If they did that, that's more like customer service, right? That's that level of customer service you want. Rob and I have a good story about customer service. And I guess I'll tell it. So Microsoft will hire Microsoft certified trainers to kind of help with people skill issues at their conferences. And they have a couple conferences a year. Actually, they have a lot of conferences a year, but there's two big ones. It used to be called Tech Ed. It's now called Ignite. And then they have a partners conference. And then they also have an internal conference for internal training for their staff. And they would hire MCTs, Microsoft Certified Trainers, to come in and assist in the lab area. And the idea was they had subject matter experts that were the people that actually programmed whatever, Office, Word, Excel, SharePoint, whatever it is. They actually had the experts, the engineers there that could answer all the questions, like, why is the button there? Well, this is why the button's there. They could explain that. But they had low satisfaction from attendees. And the reason is that people skill issue. Engineers don't typically have really good people skills. Trainers, on the other hand, do. And most of the questions are about, like, I'm doing the step in the lab and it's not working. And most of the time it's like, did you read it correctly? Go back and let's do that. And then, oh, I missed that step. I mean, that's 90% of our job, right? It's just saying, oh, let's go back and look at it. But doing it in a way that doesn't make them feel like they're an idiot, right? Say, oh, I missed something on this one too. Let's work through it again. Let's go back to the beginning and start over and see if we can work it together. Building up their confidence without tearing them down and all that kind of stuff. So we were able to do that. So we had some people there who were not, I wouldn't even say they were satisfied. I thought they were a little entitled. I don't know if that's the right word. They said, I'm here to do this, but I just wanted to come to the conference, right? So it was all about what was in it for them. Rob, myself, and some other people were always about, like, what is best for the attendee? What does the attendee want? That's a customer service kind of path. My job is only to answer questions if the lab doesn't work. If they have a question on what step they did wrong, if they had a question like, well, I don't understand why the DNS doesn't zone transfer this way, we were supposed to take that information and go to the subject matter expert, grab the subject matter expert and say, here's the engineer, he can explain the question to you. That was our job. However, most of us, because we taught this stuff, we'd say, oh, well, this is why the zone transfer does it this way. There's different ways to set up zone transfers, blah, 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 blah. We could do all of that information. So we did that. Other people would be like, that's not my job. And then they would try and find somebody else. So there's a difference in attitude there. And there's a difference in the experience for the end user. We were so focused on customer service that at one of the conferences, it was hot. I think it was Atlanta or it was Boston, wherever it was hot. It was hotter than heck that day. And you could see people just, they're just squirming in their seat because they're not comfortable because it was hot and they're working on their labs. And if you're struggling with a lab and it's hot on top of it, it just makes everything worse. So we actually went out, grabbed a bunch of bottles of water and walked around and asked anybody if they wanted water, why they did their labs. That's customer service. One of the other people that was there at that event said, why are you doing that? It's not part of our job. Our job, our overall goal, is to make sure that end users were happy. And if that means going and giving them water, I'm not above doing that. Because of our attitude in that way, we got into a very small circle of people that were used on a lot of other projects. Let's just put it that way. I can't get into a whole lot of other things. But we became the ones that were very customer service focused were the ones that got access to all kinds of really cool stuff. Which for our careers was really great. But then also, again, it's all about, you have to look it up the chain. People were going there and just saying, hey, I'm just going here so I can go to the conference, I can learn new things and not have to pay. Other people are like, well, we're here to make Microsoft happy, and that way that I can still go here and learn things and get paid for it and all that stuff. And then us saying, Microsoft's only going to be happy if the attendees are happy. So we need to make them happy. And for us, we also learn from it. So we still got the benefits from it, but we also help make sure that other people got benefits. So being engaged versus being satisfied for your staff is going to be that kind of difference. So if your scores are low on end user satisfaction, your staff is probably not engaged. So how do we get them engaged? How do we get them to start seeing things from that point of view or looking at it? So if your employees are engaged, they're going to have increased innovation. So if you want innovation, they have to be engaged. I did write an article on my blog a while ago. It says, if you want to be the best network admin or best help desk person, you need to go and find people and find out what their problems are and start coming up with solutions to problems they didn't even know that they should call you for. That's innovation. Go look for problems to solve. Don't wait for them to call you to look for the solution. Then you become a trusted advisor. Then they come to you more often, right? Because you help them out, right? It increases your retention and it increases their performance, which is all good things. You want to retain good staff. You want to have good performance. So you need to keep them engaged is really kind of one of the best important things in it. How does that impact innovation? All the studies show, and this is just one example, the blue's good, the red's bad, right? Engaged is the blue people, and the unengaged staff is the red folks. Which ones do you want? You want the blue ones. So if you want innovation, it's better when your staff's engaged, right? If we look at the next one, retention risks. What's the cost of turnover? And I never got this because there's a joke in IT, right? That you don't get a promotion unless you go get another job. I had a person, I used to do some training for the community college districts, and I would come down to, twice a year I'd go down to LA, one in the Southern California area, and I would go to one of the community colleges, and then IT staff from those community colleges come to that one college and we do a class. And we were doing things on like Windows XP, this is how long ago it was, things like that, Windows 2000. So we do a class on Active Directory, and so all the other colleges send their students there and we'd all learn. So I got to get to know these guys and gals because I would come down there twice a year to the point that, you know, it was the same group of probably about 40 different folks that all worked at all the different colleges, that when they were hosting it at their college, they would say, oh, hey, Don, you should come over and meet the family, come over, and have dinner one day this week when you're in town. Because I'm from Northern California, so when I get down to Southern California, I'd look them up and if I was nearby where anybody lived, and so we'd go and do it. One of the guys that worked there, he worked, I think, at, well, I better not say where. So he worked at one of the schools, and he couldn't get a promotion. His job was kind of his boss was kind of a pain to him, and he was one of these people that was engaged. He wanted to make a difference, and he was trying to make a difference, but he had his boss had an attitude that like change isn't going to happen, so don't even try. You know, he had a very defeatist attitude, whereas this individual had a very positive attitude. So that person ended up going and getting a job at another school. The next time I came down, I said, how's it working over there? And he says, oh, I don't work there anymore. I work at this school now. I'm like, oh, okay. And then somebody else said, oh, and I took his position because he was working at a different school. So it ended up being like this musical chairs where people just kept it. And then I came down the next time and people were at different schools. 2 years later, I came down and that individual was now working back where he was working before at the same college, now in his old boss's position. So the funny thing was he couldn't get promoted when he was there, but he got a promotion or a pay increase by leaving the organization. What does that cost an organization? It's 150% of their annual salary. If you think about it, there's institutional knowledge about how your organization does things, and you lose it when they leave and go someplace else. So how do you keep them there? Well, they look at it sometimes. You have to figure out what motivates them. If they want to grow and you have no growth opportunities for them, they're on their way out, right? Because they want to grow. And if you don't have the opportunities to let them grow or have satisfaction in the job that they're doing, they may want to move on. So they may also see that there's no long-term career at the organization. That's not a good situation to be in as well. If they leave, risk increases. One, risk of knowledge, but also if that person knew how to do something the correct way and the new person comes in doesn't know how to do it the correct way, and then they misconfigure something or they misapply a patch or something along that line, there's more cybersecurity risk that way. And remember, with retention risk, and this is not to take a certain class of people and to label them, but in general, millennials have a shorter term career view. Now, don't just because somebody's a millennial assume that this is the case. This is just a general statistic. So if you have millennials that are working for you, take this into consideration to make sure that you are looking at having them the growth opportunities that they're looking for, whatever motivates them to motivate them. But you're going to have to do that on an individual basis, right? So look at people as individuals, not as a statistic, but then get out with them and find out what motivates them, and so you don't lose any of that institutional knowledge, right? What's the impact on retention? If they're engaged, they're much more likely to stay with the organization. If they're not, they are much more likely to leave the organization. So this is a huge, and notice these bar graphs are completely different. They're not just a little bit different. There's a huge swing here on retention. So retention, engagement correlate together, right? What about performance? Engaged employees work harder, they deliver higher quality, and they typically exceed expectations. So if you feel like a worker is not working hard, or they're not delivering higher quality, or they're not exceeding expectations, then they're probably not vested in the organization, or they're not satisfied, or they're not engaged. So how do we engage them at that point in time so that we can get that? Remember, if our budget is shrinking and we have to do more with less, then engaged employees are the ones that we're going to need. Yes, this is all the soft skill stuff that we talked about. And as predicted, the impact on performance is as predicted. The engaged employees outperform unengaged employees. So if you want statistics for it, to get money or budget or your boss to buy off on you coming up with a program to kind of help engage employees, this is what you can do with it. Now, key thing to note, everybody's individual, so not everybody is pay motivated. I have the opportunity to have taken on a number of different jobs that were going to pay me considerably more, but had a longer commute, or did not have the flexibility that I have where I'm currently working. And so pay was not my driver. The flexibility was, which is more the work-life balance. And you'll find that more and more people are they're looking at work-life balance and saying, you know what? It's not worth it for me to drive 2 hours to work and 2 hours home, wasting 4 hours of my day away from my family. Now that these folks have been working from home and haven't been doing that commute, they got 4 hours extra a day. Going back to the office is not going to be a big motivator for them, right? So yes, you want to hire the best talent, and sometimes that talent lives a distance away. If you live in the Bay Area or you live in LA, traffic sucks, right? Take that into consideration for your employees. Give them some flexibility with it. There's going to be days where there's going to be an accident. It's just going to suck. We got to understand that's going to happen. So remember those other types of things. In fact, there's this movement, especially on the management side of things, for PTO, paid time off, to move towards an unlimited model of PTO. And you're like, what do you mean? They actually are moving to unlimited PTO. The idea is most people, especially on the management side of things, don't take the time that they have. So why have the liability of giving them PTO that they can then cash out? But also, let's give them the ability to do the work-life balance. The caveat to the unlimited PTO is that you need to make sure that all these tasks that you're required to do are done, or that all the projects that you have in the pot are going, right? So that's kind of where they're looking at doing this. So this is a model that they're moving to, and people are really getting into this idea of Microsoft had a way in some areas with their developers, and that was they negotiate almost like a consultant. They sit down with the individual and say, okay, this is a project, we need you to code this. And the person says, yeah, I think I'll take about 6 months. And the other person says, well, we have a deadline to get it done in 5 months. You think you can get it done in 5 months? Yes, okay. So 5 months from now is when this is going to be done. So we're going to check in this often, and you're going to tell us what your progress is on it, and we expect it to be done in 5 months. you can work whatever hours you want. You can work at home. You can work in the office. In the office, they have Xboxes and crazy, you know, pool tables, and they have beer on site. And really smart that they did this, because you motivate them to want to work by giving them everything that they would want to, and you try to keep them around because, look, do I want to work at home or do I want to work in the office? In the office, they have free beer. So I want to work in the office. Now, this probably would not fly in a local government. Maybe it would if you're in Silicon Valley. But this is a new management style, trying to get people engaged. And that's just one of the ways that they're doing it. How do you sell this to senior leadership? Well, you see those slides I just had when you have surveys on stuff? They want to know that it's going to bring them value. And so you have to show them how it's going to bring them value. And then also, they see turnover as savings, yes, because of that. But again, 150%, that's a huge difference, right? So if they understand that, yes, they got rid of this one individual, so you hired this other individual, but that individual, training them up, getting them back to the same position that other person was, the risks that also it imposes, again, that statistic is not even considering the risk side of it, it's just the cost is 150%. So it might actually be cheaper to keep the person. And
Can I add something real quick?
Yeah.
So we had a situation where at the university, we had a PBX system that had some very proprietary switches that had special configurations that needed to be applied. And this goes back to the institutional knowledge. And the individual who administered these particular switches had worked at the university for like 35, 40 years and decided to retire. And the university was like, yeah, okay, see ya. That was their idea, right? Person submitted all the correct paperwork, gone, poof. And then there was a hiccup, and they needed to reconfigure these PBX switches. And lo and behold, they have no expertise on staff. No one. They called the telephone company. Telephone company goes, yeah, we haven't used those switches in like 20 years because we don't. Everything now has moved on because technology has, the innovation in technology has, surpassed this old technology. So, university calls the individual up and says, can you come back part-time? And he goes, yeah, I'll come back part-time, but my part-time rate is what you used to pay me full-time. So the perceived savings of having an employee now retired, they now pay him literally double what they used to pay him, in essence, because he works 20 hours a week, and they pay him as if he'd worked 40.
How many times do people come back as consultants because they don't have somebody who can do the job, and then you end up getting paid?
Frequently. Yes. It happens quite frequently.
Well, we'll discuss that here in a minute, because there's actually this idea that you're losing talent and not taking care of it, making sure that you keep them, could cost you in the future because you have to get an esoteric expert to do this. I had a city that had the exact same issue. The issue was they had a different financial system, and the financial system company that was doing it went out of business. So the city negotiated to get the rights to the code so that they can have a developer come in and support it. Instead of going to get something, they brought developers in. So they hired a guy that was doing the development, and he was doing a really poor job, because when we did an audit, we found all kinds of problems with it. And they were trying to save money, but they were paying this guy more money a year than a new financial system would have cost. Now, I understand there's a lot of pain in transferring everything over to a new system, but for crying out loud, this thing was still like a mainframe, right? No, it wasn't a mainframe. It was AS400 or something like that. Anyways, still old-fashioned, and wasn't anything new, modern. They ended up, I believe they moved directly from that. Our audit had findings because I was able to scan from outside of the city, I was able to see the username and passwords for people on that system. That's kind of a big problem. Anyways, of course, I'm not going to name names. So how do you sell to leadership? Turnover is seen as a good thing. This is a comment. I understand what you're saying, but how do you convince others? Again, the best thing to do is to get the statistics. The other thing to do is also know what they're doing. So here in Northern California, there's an organization called the Municipal Management Association of Northern California. There's the League of California Cities. There's ICMA, which is the International City County Management Association. Guess what? ICMA, this is the magazine that probably your city manager has on their desk. On it in June or July was a whole issue on cybersecurity. And I looked at it and I said, you know, some of this stuff is good and some of it is overly simplified. Like, you know, to prevent ransomware, these are the 3 things you need to do. I got a list of 20 things you need to, 85 things that you need to do to prevent ransomware, not 3. And those 3, while will go a long way in doing it, there's nothing gained by oversimplifying it. They should have containerized those things. And if I have 85 different things that you need to do, can I put those into bigger buckets so that I can then still have those 85 things, but when I tell them what they need to do, they get the idea, like, you know, categorize them and then talk about the categories. Anyways, so those types, my idea for this is, if you can join one of those organizations, do so if you can, so that you know what the city manager is being told, right? So I've been a member for ICMA for a long time, and the reason I'm a member of it, because my clients are all cities, and I have to talk to councils, and I have to talk to city managers and general managers for districts, so I need to be able to understand where they're coming from and know what they know. So I try to put myself into those positions. And then I sign up for all the different information I possibly can get. You know, Gartner and Infotech both have services you can subscribe to, and they can get you some of this information, like the statistics that I have, I got from them. So using those statistics, you can go back to them and say, hey, engaged employees do this. And by the way, there's plenty of stuff. Bing is your friend. Go search stuff up. Notice I didn't say Google, but then I just made a reference to it. Anyways, because everybody uses that as a generic term. Go do an internet search. So how do you identify when you're dealing with an organization's unwillingness to accept change versus acknowledging an agency's core culture? Is there a difference worth considering? Example, some agencies are extremely risk adverse and others are more willing to take risks with cutting edge solutions and programs. Great question. Knowing the culture within your organization is going to be a big part of this. But generally, everybody's culture is they want IT to bring value to the organization and they want risk mitigated, right? And so making sure that we're constant when we're communicating that's what we're trying to accomplish. So even if they are going to be a little bit more conservative, great, you can be more conservative. Maybe we can say, hey, you know, this newer solution also mitigates risks in a different type of way. Or looking at it from a different side of things, saying, yes, I know your risk, I know that you want to do this cutting edge stuff, but did you know that these are the risks? How do you want to address those risks? I've never heard anybody say, oh, we will accept the risk of getting hit with ransomware. Nobody's going to say that. So, you know, part of it is kind of like wording, how we word things. But there's also a great book, and the book's name is, I'm looking on my desktop. Give me just 1 second because I think it's really worth your time to look up this book. It's called Buy-In, Sell Your Good Idea, Saving Your Good Idea from Being Shot Down by John Cotter and Laura Whitehead. John Cotter is a big management guru that's out there. A lot of people know him. Your city manager probably knows him because I think he spoke at ICMA before in the past. He was referenced in, he gets referenced oftentimes in the articles from the magazine from ICMA. So I know that they know his point of view on stuff. There's a lot of good books like that, but that one, Buy-In, Saving Your Good Idea from Getting Shot Down by John Cotter, Kotter. I don't get paid to endorse him, so I'm not necessarily doing that, but I'm just saying that that book was very useful in trying to sell things and matching what the culture is, but still trying to sell the ideas. So check that out. That's my recommendation for you on that. Getting information like this about, what are the types of engagement drivers, what things will get engagement out of employees. So looking at what those different things are, the culture is going to be a part of it too. And because someone just mentioned culture, I think it's worth taking that into consideration. If people like the culture, they may work there for less money, right? Would you take a job? You want to get paid more to work for a bad boss, or would you take less money to work for a good boss that cares about you and wants to help you with your career? So, I mean, you can answer that question. You can say, you know what, I don't mind dealing with jerks because I work with them all the time, so great, I'll do that. But for me, I would rather work with somebody who cares about me and wants to have me grow, even if I got paid less. Not a lot less. I mean, I'm not going to work for free, but you know what I mean? So there's those types of things to consider. So culture is going to be a part of it. So if you want to engage them, what are you doing to empower them? How are you developing them into leaders? A manager and a leader are two different things, right? Anybody can be a leader. Anyone can influence others in a positive way, right? And that's basically what a leader is. So how do we get other folks to lead others? Do you have candidates within your office that you think could be good leaders? And can you, as I like to say, deputize them and say, hey, I would like you to kind of work on, bringing up people's morale around here. I'd like you to start leading the charge on cybersecurity or whatever the initiative is. Really big thing too is just how coworkers relate with one another. Dissension in the ranks is like the worst thing that you can have. If you have staff that counteract your decisions, or you have staff that don't buy in on something and then they voice that fact, they throw you under the bus after you've made a decision, which I've had before in my life as well, it causes tension. Also, if you have gossip in the office, it can actually be a productivity killer. And in most studies, I actually looked up a bunch of studies on this. Most studies indicate that there is a loss of productivity with gossip, not only from the people that are doing the gossip, the other people who are listening to it, but also the people that don't even know that they're being talked about. But they may sense something, or they may feel, because people are going to have tells, they're going to, subconsciously, do nonverbal communication. So those people also become less productive. Plus, they probably feel a little bit more left out of everything. So gossip's not a good thing. Making sure that if you're the manager of the organization, you're stopping that whenever it can. Lead by example. Those types of things. Dealing with those intangible soft skills that we talked about, that everybody really wants. Those are the things we got to kind of focus in on. Again, some of the things to retain them: compensation, benefits, work-life balance, working environment, and there's different dispositions people have, their emotional outlook, their state of mind, their natural tendencies. Knowing what those are, people have this, they call it the DISC assessment to determine what your behavioral type is, and then they have the Myers-Briggs assessment. Knowing that for your staff, we go through that at our organization. We do the DISC assessment, and I actually do like a DISC assessment training for our staff when we get them started, because one, you kind of want to know what their disposition is too, so you also can figure out how you can possibly motivate them a little bit better. But then your emotional outlook, their state of mind can be influenced. And they can be influenced. If somebody's not a positive person, if you give them more positive things to think about, they will become more positive. And it's all about what they see, hear, read, watch. All of that stuff plays an important role in this. And there's scientific studies on all this. And I have a whole other thing that maybe one day I will post up here called the results chain, that kind of works you through that process and shows you where all the scientific studies are that show how you get results out of people. And it all starts with what they see, what they hear, what they read, and you have influence over those things. So, and I can show you one of the ways that you can do that here. So coming up with these initiatives, how do you get this, and who should be doing it? Should HR be doing it? No, it needs to come from them, right? Why are you going to do all the work? Have them do the work, right? You want them to be engaged, have them help you help them, right? So, so they need to have a voice in creating whatever engagement initiatives you're going to have. So we are meeting what's important to them. So if they're involved in it, that'll do it. What about rogue employees? Is that like shadow IT? The kind that can't seem to find a balance between communication and taking initiative. Those are fun too. Don't want to be perceived as a roadblock, but need them to accept that they have to slow down, communicate what's going on, set expectations, give people time. So great questions. We have a way of actually dealing with this. And part of that is, again, like I said, we have influence on what we give to our staff. So what can we give them that can kind of help them in those areas? And I have an idea here in a second. So the idea with this slide is that you want to make sure that HR is not running it, you're not running it, you get the staff to kind of get involved, and you let it be kind of organic. You set the framework up to get the feedback and get a process and a meeting scheduled to get stuff from them, but then you let them run with it. You know, in the old days, it used to be things like, you know, take them out to the miniature golf games and go out there. Now, it works for some staff. It doesn't work for all staff because some staff aren't motivated by social interactions. Like if you did the DISC assessment, you have somebody that's an I, not an I, a C, which they're like kind of like Spock. They're not people oriented. They're very task oriented. They're very logical. They're not very emotional, and they don't typically buy in on mandatory socializing. So that's not going to work if that's the one way. Now your staff may not have everybody have buy-in on something like that. That might be a good team building exercise, but may not necessarily work for the engagement part. So IT kind of has to lead this for the IT staff, not HR. But you can go to HR and they may have ideas for you. Definitely sit down with them and say, hey, I'm trying to engage staff more. I'm taking the initiative, IT director, I'm taking the initiative and I'm going to try to engage my staff more and I need your help to do it. You know, and saying it that way makes them feel valuable too, the HR person, so they're more likely to help you out as well to get them. And I know that the question was about what can you do. I have a solution, but it's going to be in this section. So give me a second. I'll get to that question about like what are some ways that you can do that. So what are some of the challenges of remote teamwork? One, obviously we know, let us know what your challenges have been and then we can address them here. So just put them in the comments. But some of the challenges that we have seen in studies that have been done, because people are doing studies right now trying to figure all this stuff out. The challenge has been there's a new way of doing things, and you know some people are change adverse. In other words, they don't like change. You know, and that's kind of difficult when you're in technology because things change rapidly, and we have to kind of adjust for that. In my personal life, I hate change. In technology, I will use my cell phone until I don't change it every 6 months because there's a newer, better thing out there. I try to get my value out of it. I try to get it to last more than 2 years. It seems to be they all break down at 2 years, but I try to get the maximum out of it. One, I don't like to have to go through the process of re-downloading all my apps and getting all my passwords reset up and all that happy stuff. I don't want to do it. At work, I'm a little bit more aggressive about change because I have to be, right? So I adopt new things. I believe in our IT department, we eat our own dog food. We start using stuff before the rest of the staff is asked to use stuff. So we were using Teams when Teams first came out. And now that everybody had to do it, we were already well-versed in it. There's a need for end-user training for some of this stuff, and is that being met? So now you tell people to use Zoom or use Teams or whatever they're going to be using. Did you provide them with any training for it? Right? We don't want to assume that they know how to use web interfaces. Not only the whole technology thing, having to ship to people, webcams and keyboards and mice and second monitors. because, at work they have 2 monitors. Now at home they only have 1. They're not as effective anymore. So that kind of stuff that needs to be done kind of helps with that. But also doing the training, they need to set it up, right? And they don't have IT to come in and set their office up, and they just show up and everything's there. So training, they're going to have a lot of stress and anxiety, a lot of loneliness and feelings of separation, grief and depression. Those are the big ones that we're seeing right now on the emotional side of things. All of those affect productivity. And so if you want to be a good manager, you want to make sure that people are productive, you need to watch their emotional situation. And that's part of the morale building that you need to work into it. So work-life balance may be difficult for those people because now they have kids who are working from home that are sitting next to them trying to do their homework while they're trying to do other work. So work-family demands have changed. We find that one of the issues that I joked with another city manager, we were talking the other day, and he said something about, I'm working from home, and my wife has all this list of things that she wants me to do, and I'm like, I'm working from home. That means I'm working. Don't give me a list of things to do. And I chuckled because my wife was too. She decided she wants to, clean the carpets, and I'm like, I got work to do. But she can't move the furniture in the house, so she's expecting me to do it. Well, you're home, and so there is that idea of work-life balance can kind of get a little blurred there. So helping employees with that would be good. So controlling stress. So this is the information you want to get to your employees, your staff. You want to let them know that they should take a period of time to unwind. If it's not scheduled, it's not going to happen. So tell them or recommend to them, hey, schedule some break time. If you're at the office, you take breaks. Well, take some breaks during the day. Get out, go for a walk around the block or whatever it is. Get out and, unwind. Whatever they do to unwind. Everybody does different things, so you just figure out what it is. Or let them figure out what it is, but just let them know that they should schedule it, because if they don't schedule it, it's not going to happen. I have the same thing. I go out and usually go on walks. If I do not put it on my calendar gets filled. So I have to, Monday, I have to sit down and say each day of the week, okay, I don't have anything in the morning. I'm going to go for a walk then. I'm going to go to the pool and go swimming on this day. And I schedule it. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. And the other day I was thinking, oh, I'm going to go to the pool, and I didn't schedule on my calendar. Guess what? It never happened. So sometimes people need a location to de-stress. Now, if they're working in the house, now they see the work over there. They're not being able to de-stress where they normally used to de-stress. Now, I have a separate library, and Rob can attest to it because he's seen it. But I go into that room. There's no technology in that room. There's a speaker. I lied. There's a speaker, so I can listen to music in there. But that is the only thing that's allowed in there. I go into that room. I go there and I read a book. It's my quiet space. It's an area that I can de-stress. I can meditate, I can read, I can do whatever I want, and it's an area that's kind of like a safe zone, right? Most people don't have that. If they have kids all over them and in-laws living with them, all that kind of stuff, it's going to be very difficult for them to do that. Some people have it, a garden in their backyard, and they go sit out there. That's fine. It's fine now, but it may not be fine when it's 110 outside. It may not be fine when it's raining or lightning, right? So those are the things to look out for. And any type of activity that they can enjoy, cooking, running, walking, dancing, swimming, whatever. Join a virtual book club. I have one. It's a group from our local church or whatever. And we do a Teams meeting on Saturday morning, and we read a book and we talk about it. It gets me out of my head for a while, whatever I'm worried about and problems, and I have to focus on making sure I read the book, during the week. So it's actually been really good for me, and I actually get a lot of support from it. I usually feel pretty good afterwards, recharged, and I feel really good about, the rest of the week coming up. But so those types of things can really help. And then somebody to talk to. They need to know if they have stress that they can come to you and say, look, I am stressed out. You need to have that feedback from them. They need to feel comfortable coming to you and saying, this project is due this time, I'm stressed out. Our job as managers is to help them remove barriers so that they can do their job. And if the barrier is stress, people do not perform as well when they're stressed. So whatever we can do to help with that, I understand there's going to be deadlines and things are going to have to be done, but can we reallocate sources? Can we get them some other help? Can we get some external help? Or can we just give them a word of encouragement to calm them down? Whatever. So all kinds of different ideas on that, tons of books on that kind of stuff. What about loneliness? Get to know your coworkers better. This is the time to do this. You're disconnected from them. They're not in the office, but I'm asking you to get to know them better. Set up some time to meet with them, not to just chit-chat about stuff, but there's other types of ways of combating that. We have a weekly meeting for me and my IT staff. So I cover internal IT staff and external, the IT auditors and all that stuff. So we actually all come together at one time during the week, and we start off our meeting. First thing is just like, how's everybody doing? So it's check-in time. Then the next part is, what are your current challenges, and what do you need to, what can we do to help you with those challenges? We also take a time to go over anything that's helpful for folks, what we learned. Like if I learned some information about how you can de-stress, then I might pass that on. There's plenty of stuff on the internet for all this stuff. Use the video on web conferencing. You know, there's a lot to be said for seeing somebody's face. And psychologically and emotionally, there's a lot to be said from seeing somebody's face. In fact, 80% of your communication comes from your body tone. So making sure that you can express that, it actually does much better. I just read an article the other day that said, don't email anything emotional to people. Text and email is not, if you're going to have an emotional conversation with somebody, do not have it via email or text, because it will come across as being insincere. And if you are going to have it, the better option is to do a phone call. The next better option, or the best option, is if they can see your face. If they see your face, they will see that you're more sincere. Well, you have to actually be sincere. If they see your face and you're not sincere, they're going to see that too, right? Because remember, body communication is going to have a lot to do with it. So videos on the web conference, I know a lot of people have been kind of avoiding that. I try to, at any point in time I can, when I meet with clients or staff, I try to have my video on. I want them to see that I'm, and I still dress, I put on a collared shirt, and so that, it feels more normal, right? It's the way we normally do things. And find creative ways to connect in fun and meaningful ways. We did a training, and we did a virtual, what was it called? A virtual scavenger hunt, right? There's actually a virtual cybersecurity scavenger hunt, and I heard about it on a SANS webinar I was watching. And people get to learn about cybersecurity by, you have them look up certain things, you give them clues for them to look stuff up, and then it takes them to websites that will give them a little bit of learning where they're trying to find the answer. And then you have a competition, and people like badges and gamification of stuff. So it's actually, they learn something as they go through it. This is a fun and creative way of doing that. It kept them engaged. It also taught them something at the same time. And then ask what other people are doing. You got the MISAC forum and stuff like that. Reach out to other cities and say, what are you doing to do these things? I want to make sure that my staff is engaged, not lonely. There's a lot of uncertainty going on, so how are staff dealing with that at this point in time? So one of the suggestions from, this was I think from an ICMA article, is basically talked about taking a break from social media, especially given the situations now, which is everything. There's a lot of doom and gloom out there from a lot of different areas, and so 2020 has not been a stellar year, so there's a smorgasbord of bad news to pick from, so maybe just avoid it. It's also an election year on top of all that, so there's a lot of divisiveness on there. So taking a break from social media is actually good for people. Getting some exercise, encourage them to take classes or webinars out there, help them structure their time. Make sure that they know that they can seek professional help if they need it, emotionally. Because again, we have a spike in reports of depression and stuff like that. So helping that is to stay connected with your staff, and make sure they get an adequate rest. They're doing those relaxation activities we kind of talked about earlier. Taking a break from the news. is another one. It's kind of like social media too, right? A lot of negativity out there, and so just trying to avoid that can kind of help people's general mood. Suggest that they go into journaling. People that are typically in the dumps or they're not feeling particularly well, gratitude journals are often recommended by counselors. So go ahead and kind of push that there. In all of this, a lot of this comes into this whole idea of cognitive behavioral therapy that counselors and psychologists use, and you can look that up. And there's a lot of tools and surveys, questionnaires you can ask them to kind of figure out where they're at, and things that can be done, little things that can be done to kind of help people, like the gratitude journal is a good example, or taking breaks from social media and news. All part of the cognitive behavioral therapy toolkit. And the idea is you give somebody a toolkit so that they can better manage their emotions and helping them with that. And all those things kind of fall into it. So this was another article that I just saw the other day. It says, building a psychologically safe safety in virtual teams takes effort and strategy that pays off in engagement. So remember, we were talking about engagement. So to pay off an engagement, which increases performance, retention, and all the good things that we want in IT. So psychology is going to be a part of the new hat that you've got to wear on top of everything else, sorry. But trying to really meet their emotional needs is going to be more important when their emotional needs are in the dumps right now. So meetings. Weekly meetings with staff, do emotional check-ins, ask them about their challenges, ask for their status reports, assign them any new tasks, go over what those assignments are, figure out if there's any needs that they have, and then schedule the next meeting and let them know that we're following up on all these things. Be more structured about it. If you have an office where you're very unstructured about it, do not continue the unstructured. Actually become more structured because it helps with their mood and their productivity and everything else. Make sure that you work towards continuous feedback. So as they're doing tasks, don't wait till the end of the year to give feedback to the staff. You want to give it when they do something good. Let them know they're doing good. If they're not doing up to par, figuring out a way to get to it. Oh, geez, it's going to automatically end. So I'm going to get through the next parts really fast because I didn't realize this was, I thought I could just keep on talking, but I can't. So the one thing that we do a Taco Tuesday, which is where we have a meeting, we talk with everybody. We have, maybe we talk about a recent webinar we did, we talk about a book we just read, maybe we watch a TED Talk together. All of it helps them to understand that innovation. It engages them. We can do games and challenges during that period of time. So we can debate the cybersecurity issues found in the Star Wars movies. Right? One, they're now applying cybersecurity related concepts into, yes, this mythical realm, but it gets a lot more engagement out of employees. So that's just what we named it. And I didn't name this. This is something that where my wife works, they have a Taco Tuesday, and on Tuesdays they order tacos and they do this stuff. Have a meeting to go over this. So I do have a video that you can watch on Career for Cybersecurity, and the link is in there. And then we have cybersecurity and IT staff skills that we can go, and soft skills. We did a webinar on that. That's available to you. And we ran out of time to talk about educations and certifications. So, because this thing is going to turn us off in like 30 seconds. So we're going to have to come back and we'll talk about education and certifications. You have the slides, you can download them, you can check them out. Sorry we talked too much, but there's a lot of stuff out there that you can look into, and depending upon where you're at, send me an email if you want to talk about the certifications. I'll set up a Teams meeting, we just talk about me and you, about CISSP or CISM or which one's better for you. And we can go over this at a later date.